The Galactic Combat Academy's training dome hummed with the familiar energy of another sparring session. Commander Zethkar observed from the elevated platform as his mixed-species class prepared for their daily combat trials. His 4 eyes swept across the assembled students. Towering Kronak warriors with their chitinous armor, lithe Veltari assassins with their razor-sharp claws, and the telepathic Mindari whose mental prowess could crush weaker minds. And then there was Sarah Chen. The human girl sat quietly in the corner, her small frame dwarfed by her alien classmates. For 3 months, she had attended every class without speaking, unless directly addressed. She observed everything, participated minimally, and had yet to volunteer for a single combat demonstration. Her instructors had begun to wonder if Earth's military had made an error in selecting her for their elite exchange program. "Today, we practice advanced combat scenarios," Zethkar announced, his translated voice echoing through the dome. "Real combat situations, where hesitation means death." Vexthul, a Kronak standing 8 feet tall with natural bone spurs protruding from his forearms, cracked his knuckles with a sound like breaking timber. He was the class champion, having defeated every opponent in single combat. His species had evolved on a death world where only the strongest survived, and he embodied that lethal heritage. "I require a new challenge," Vexthul growled, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "These exercises bore me." Several students stepped back instinctively. Even among apex predator species, Vexthul was feared. His combat record was flawless, his technique brutal and efficient. Sarah remained seated, her dark eyes studying the Kronak warrior with an intensity that Zethkar found curious. There was something in her expression, not fear, but calculation. "Perhaps," Zethkar said slowly, "someone would volunteer to face our champion?" Silence filled the dome. The Veltari assassin, Kesra, examined her claws with sudden interest. The Mindari student, Cylon, suddenly found the floor fascinating. Even the typically aggressive Thorian berserkers seemed content to avoid Vexthul's attention. Then Sarah stood up. The movement was so quiet, so unexpected, that it took several seconds for the class to notice. When they did, a ripple of whispered conversation spread through the assembled students. "Human," Vexthul rumbled, his voice carrying a mixture of amusement and disdain. "You would face me?" Sarah walked to the center of the combat circle, her steps measured and deliberate. She was barely 5.5 feet tall, weighing perhaps 130 pounds. Next to Vexthul's massive frame, she looked like a child facing a siege engine. "Yes," she said simply. Her voice was calm, betraying no emotion. The other students formed a wider circle, some climbing onto elevated platforms for a better view. This would either be the shortest fight in Academy history or the most surprising. Zethkar activated the arena's safety protocols, though he wondered if they would be sufficient. Vexthul had hospitalized his last 3 opponents, despite the energy shields designed to prevent lethal damage. "Combat parameters set," the automated system announced. "Contestants may begin on the signal." Vexthul dropped into his species, traditional fighting stance, a low crouch that showcased his natural weapons and allowed for explosive forward movement. His bone spurs gleamed under the dome's lighting, each one capable of piercing standard body armor. Sarah simply stood there, arms at her sides, looking almost relaxed. The starting tone echoed through the dome. Vexthul launched himself forward, with predatory speed, his massive form covering the distance between them in milliseconds. His bone spurs extended fully, aimed at Sarah's center mass in a killing strike that had ended dozens of battles. What happened next would be analyzed and debated in Academy records for years to come. Sarah moved, not the desperate dodge of prey, fleeing a predator, but a precise economical shift that took her exactly where she needed to be. Vexthul's charge carried him past her by inches, his momentum now working against him. As he passed, Sarah's hand shot out, not in a wild swing, but with surgical precision. Her fingers found a specific point just below Vexthul's skull ridge, where Kronak anatomy placed a critical nerve cluster. The pressure she applied lasted exactly 1.3 seconds. Vexthul's legs folded beneath him. His massive frame crashed to the arena floor with earth-shaking force, unconscious before he finished falling. The dome fell silent except for the hum of energy systems. Sarah stepped back from the fallen Kronak, her breathing unchanged, her expression still calm. She looked up at Commander Zethkar and nodded once. Match concluded, the automated system announced, seeming as confused as everyone else. Winner, Cadet Chen. The silence stretched for several more seconds before exploding into chaos. Students shouted questions in a dozen languages, their translators struggling to keep pace. How had she known about Kronak neural anatomy? How had she moved so precisely? How had she remained so calm? Zethkar descended from his platform, his 4 eyes fixed on the human girl who had just accomplished the impossible. Cadet Chen, he said carefully. That was impressive. Sarah shrugged, a peculiarly human gesture. He telegraphed his attack pattern in the first week of classes. Kronak combat doctrine prioritizes overwhelming force over adaptability. Once I understood his species' neural architecture, the rest was just timing. She spoke as if discussing the weather, not the systematic dismantling of their most feared warrior. You've been studying us, Zethkar realized. All of us. For 3 months. Observation is a valuable skill, Sarah replied. My species learned early that understanding your opponent is more important than overpowering them. Around the arena, Vexthul was beginning to regain consciousness, his massive head shaking as awareness returned. He would be fine, though his pride would require more time to heal. As the class dispersed, whispered conversations following in their wake, Zethkar remained standing next to the quiet human girl. Why now? He asked. Why reveal your capabilities? Today? Sarah looked up at him, and for the first time he saw something that might have been a smile cross her features. Because, she said quietly, I was done learning. The implications of that statement would keep Zethkar awake for many nights to come. If this was what humans considered a student, what were their actual warriors capable of? In the Academy's database, Sarah Chen's file was quietly updated. Under the section marked Threat Assessment, her rating changed from minimal to classified. The human girl remained silent in most classes after that day, but no one ever underestimated her again.